It is the winter of 1921, and a man named Vasile Popa is standing ankle-deep in mud on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He is 31 years old. He arrived from Romania 6 years ago with $11, a coat that didn't fit, and a name the foreman at the steel mill kept mispronouncing. The truck idling beside him is a 1918 Mack AB, 4 cylinders, chain drive, solid rubber tires, and a reputation for rattling a man's spine loose on gravel roads. Vasile doesn't own it, yet he's borrowing it. The owner gave him 48 hours to haul a load of structural steel beams 18 miles, or hand back the keys for good. It's 17 degrees. The road ahead is half mud, half ice. He climbs in. That single decision, to climb into a truck someone else owned, on a road that made no promises, in a country that didn't yet feel like his, is where the story begins. The story of one of the most quietly remarkable fortunes in American trucking history. And Vasile had come to Pittsburgh the way most immigrants came in those years, through a connection, a cousin, a rumor that the mills were hiring. He spent his first 4 years on the blast furnace floor at Carnegie Steel's South Side Works, 12-hour shifts at temperatures that peeled paint off the walls. He saved money with the discipline of a man who had grown up with nothing and intended to keep growing out of it. By 1920, he had managed to set aside roughly $300, a sum that felt enormous, and was, by the standards of the neighborhood, genuinely significant. But Vasile had watched the trucks. Every morning and afternoon, through the grime of the mill windows, he watched the Macks and the White Motor Company rigs rolling in and out of the yard. He understood something that a lot of men around him hadn't quite processed yet. The automobile had transformed passenger travel, but the truck was doing something more fundamental, as it was replacing the horse-drawn freight wagon at exactly the moment when American industry needed to move more material, faster, over longer distances. The roads were bad, the trucks were crude, but the demand was there, and it was growing. He approached a local hauler named Dobrescu, another Romanian, a decade older, who ran 2 trucks out of a yard near the Monongahela River, and made a proposal. He would drive for free for 3 months. In exchange, Dobrescu would teach him the routes, the rates, the paperwork, and the mechanics. Vasile's $300 would sit in the bank untouched. He wanted the knowledge, not a wage. Dobrescu called him crazy. He hired him anyway. See that subscribe button? It's our exchange. Your way of saying this reached me. Not about the action's size, but its meaning. Hit it if this resonated, drop a like if it moved you, and comment your thoughts on this story. Let's complete this circle together. Those 3 months changed everything. Vasile learned that the most profitable routes weren't the long, glamorous hauls across state lines. They were the short, dirty, repetitive runs. Construction materials, manufactured goods, mill components, the unglamorous logistics that kept Pittsburgh building and producing. He learned that most small operators were losing money not because their rates were too low, but because their trucks were always breaking down, and the mechanics they called were expensive and slow. He bought a manual on the Mack AB's engine. He spent his evenings memorizing it. When his 3 months were up, Vasile had his $300 and something worth considerably more, a clear-eyed picture of exactly where the inefficiencies were and where the money was hiding inside them. In the spring of 1922, he spent $240 on a used 1919 White Model 15 truck, a 1.5-ton flatbed that had done service hauling supplies during the war years and came with a cracked radiator bracket and a driver's seat repaired with canvas and wire. He fixed both himself over a weekend, using scrap metal from a bin behind the mill yard. The remaining $60 became his operating capital. He got his first contract through the most basic possible method. He walked into the purchasing office of a building supply company in Braddock and told them he could beat their current hauling rate by 15% and guarantee same-day delivery within a 20-mile radius. At the purchasing manager, a taciturn man named Calloway told him he'd had promises like that before. Vasile offered a penalty clause. If he missed a scheduled delivery, he'd haul the next load free. Calloway shook his hand. Vasile didn't miss a single delivery in the first 6 months. Not one. What he was doing, and what separated him from a lot of men trying to run small trucking operations in those years, was treating the truck like a business asset rather than just a tool. Every mechanical issue got addressed immediately, even when it cost money he could barely spare. Every route got analyzed for the fastest path with the least road damage. He kept a notebook, in Romanian, then slowly in a hybrid of Romanian and English, recording every load, every rate, every delay, and its cause. By 1924, he had a second truck, a 1923 Mack AB, the Bulldog, as drivers called it, a 7.5-ton workhorse with a chain drive and a cast-iron durability that matched its nickname. He hired a driver named Kovac, a Hungarian immigrant who understood engines the way Vasile understood routes. By 1926, there were 5 trucks in the Popa hauling yard, 3 Macks and 2 Whites. He had contracts with 3 construction firms, a steel fabricator, and a regional brick manufacturer. His English was still imperfect and probably always would be. His ledger, however, was immaculate. The question people ask about men like Vasile Popa is always some version of, what made him different? The tools were available to anyone. The trucks were available to anyone. The routes and the contracts and the opportunity, all of it existed for every ambitious man with a few $100s and a willingness to work. What Vasile had that was harder to replicate was a specific quality of attention. He never stopped studying the operation. He never assumed that because something was working, it couldn't work better. In 1928, he borrowed against his truck assets and purchased a small fuel depot near the Rankin Bridge. He had noticed that independent operators, the single truck men who were starting to multiply as the road slowly improved, were losing significant money driving out of their way to refuel. He sold them fuel at rates slightly below the nearest competitor and offered a credit arrangement that earned him loyalty and interest simultaneously. The fuel depot made him more money in its first 18 months than his hauling operation had in 3 years. By 1929, when the financial collapse that would level so much of American industry came roaring in, Vasile Popa had no debt. He had been watching the credit expansion of the late 20s with the wariness of a man who had grown up watching what happened when borrowed prosperity ran out. As when competitors went under and sold their trucks for whatever they could get, Vasile bought. By 1931, he had 11 trucks and 2 fuel depots and a reputation in western Pennsylvania as the most reliable freight hauler between Pittsburgh and Youngstown. He became a millionaire, by conservative estimation, sometime around 1934. He never moved to a bigger house. He kept driving a truck himself 2 or 3 times a week until he was well past 50, not because he had to, but because he said it kept him honest about the roads, the loads, and the men doing the actual work. Vasile Popa died in 1963 at the age of 73. His company, by then renamed Popa Freight Services, employed over 90 people and ran a fleet of 31 trucks. His son Stefan took over the operation and expanded it into Ohio through the 1970s. Local historical records in the Pittsburgh area contain references to the company in city contract archives, though no biography of Vasile was ever written. That he's not in any history book. He probably wouldn't have cared. What he left behind wasn't a story about the American dream as an abstraction. It was something more practical and more durable. A detailed proof that a man who understood trucks, watched the roads, kept his ledger clean, and refused to mistake a good year for permanent safety could build something real out of almost nothing. Yet the 1918 Mack AB that he drove that first winter in the mud outside Pittsburgh still exists in modified form in at least 2 private collections. Restored examples of the model, not his specific truck, but machines from the same era that tell you something true about the weight of what he carried and the roads he had to cross to carry it. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if you know a trucking story that deserves to be remembered, share it below. We're always looking for the next one.
But